Hello and welcome. My name is Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all the UFO, UAP news from everywhere and anywhere. Today, I'd like to relate something that I saw on Nash and Paranormal Land. It involves one of the most incredible UFO sightings ever. Lonnie Zamorra was born on September the 7th, 1933, in Magdalena, New Mexico, USA. He worked as a police officer and patrolled the streets of Socorro, New Mexico. And on April the 24th, 1964, after 5 p.m., while on patrol in a white Pontiac on the outskirts of the city, he saw a car exceeding the speed limit, so he began to follow it. The car didn't stop, however, and while he was following it, the officer heard a very loud noise. Looking to the southwest, he thought he saw what he believed to be flames, orange and blue in color, slowly descending. The noise had been so loud that he thought an explosion had occurred. And he knew that not far from there was a dynamite depot, so he decided to abandon the pursuit, turning off onto a rural road toward where he believed something serious was happening. As he approached, he began to see what he initially thought was an overturned vehicle on the side of the road. So he radioed headquarters to report his position and to tell them that he was attending to an accident. But the object had a strange glow, and the closer he got, the more details he could make out. It was a circular object, somewhat oval-shaped, with a strange insignia he couldn't quite identify. It was resting on the ground on metal legs. And to his astonishment, he saw two small beings next to this metal object, who from a distance appeared to be either children or smallish adults. One of these beings noticed the patrol car and seemed alarmed by his presence. They were dressed in garments that completely covered them from head to toe. And at a distance of approximately 40 meters or about 120 feet, Lonnie stopped his patrol car and got out to approach on foot. As he did so, the object began to emit smoke from its underside, and then flames began to erupt. Lonnie's first thought was the object was about to explode, and so he ran back to take cover behind his car. Once he reached his patrol car, he covered his face with his arms because he heard a very loud noise. When he lowered his arms to look at the object, it was no longer in its original position, but had risen a few meters off the ground, or about 6 feet. There was no more noise coming from the object, nor was there any smoke or flames that he had seen earlier, but the object remained hovering without seeming to need any kind of propulsion. A few moments later, the object began flying south, where Lonnie lost sight of it from his patrol car. He then contacted the radio operator, asking him to look out his window to see if he could also see the object moving away. But the operator couldn't see it. And then a few minutes later, a sergeant arrived at the scene, responding to Lonnie's earlier call when he still thought he was going to a traffic accident. This sergeant couldn't see the object, but he did notice that Lonnie was very sweaty and pale. He also noticed that in the place where the UFO had been resting, the object had left marks on the ground that corresponded to the legs on which it stood. They also found that some plants in the area were burned but cool to the touch. A sheriff's deputy also arrived at the scene and saw the same thing as the sergeant. But the ground in some parts, he noticed, was sandy, and the officer found what appeared to be footprints. This incident was reported to the military, and the Air Force sent investigators to the site. The FBI also showed up, and it's also known that there were also investigators there that worked for the Air Force's Project Blue Book. Now, Project Blue Book was a series of investigations into the UFO phenomenon by the U.S. Air Force that began in early 1952 and lasted until 1969. One of the objectives of Project Blue Book was to determine if UFOs were potential threats to national security. When Lonnie and his colleagues returned to the police station, the radio operator informed them that approximately at the time that Lonnie had that strange encounter, he had received 3 telephone reports about a rare blue flame in the area. Now, Major Hector Quintanilla, the director of Project Blue Book, became quite interested in this case. He was sure that Lonnie had seen an object that had thoroughly impressed him, and he did not doubt his reliability as a witness. The investigation was very thorough. Air Force bases were checked to see if there had been any atmospheric balloon launches. The activities of helicopters in the area were investigated, as well as those of government and private aircraft in the area where the object had been seen. Many more investigations were carried out, but nothing could explain the object that Lonnie had seen. Now, some civilian investigators proposed that Lonnie's sighting had been a hot air balloon. Now, the hot air from the balloon would have burned the plants, but it's difficult to believe that Lonnie, an officer who had knowledge of aerial vehicles in the vicinity, would have mistaken a hot air balloon for a UFO from another planet. And although the Lonnie Zamorra UFO sighting is one of the most credible sightings ever, there have been several other alternative theories as to what he actually saw. Several alternative explanations have been put forth. These include the testing of a lunar landing device by personnel at the White Sands Missile Range. Another theory put forth is that it was a prank perpetuated by students at nearby New Mexico Tech. So in 1966, Socorro County proposed developing the landing site of the Zamorra UFO to make it more accessible to tourists. Stone walkways and steps and even benches were constructed around the alleged landing site. But it was constructed a quarter mile or 400 meters from the actual landing site that Zamorra observed because of local rumors that that site had been contaminated by radioactivity. Then in 2012, Socorro city officials David Vasquez and Paz Salome commissioned local artist Erica Burley to paint a mural on a local spillway to commemorate the alleged Zamorra UFO sighting. So Lonnie Zamorra died on November the 2nd, 2009 in Socorro of a heart attack. He was 76 years old. And although he had gotten tired of all the attention, he never reneged on his story. My name is Al Barrows. This has been UFO Disclosure. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks.